Welcome back to the Lazy Money Machine podcast, the short episodes Graham and I put out regularly to discuss a topic, or today a little audio clip that we found on the internet. And today we're going to have a very interesting one, so I'll play it first and then we can speak about it.
Historically, interest rates ought to be 8, 10, 12, not 2, 3. If you can't make a business proposition work at 2 or 3% interest, so you pay 1 or 2 points over that, you ought to swallow a fucking revolver.
Oh.
There we go.
That was nasty.
It was a bit nasty, but it's the guy that you hear talking, for those of you who don't know, is called Dan Pena. You can Google him. He's a coach with a very peculiar approach to teach his students.
Unforgiving, I think, isn't it?
Very unforgiving. He's very, he always says that if everything else fails, people come to me. They've tried Tony Robbins, they've tried all the other guys, and then when they can't make anything work, that's when they come to me. So, Look, he has a style, and you can think about it what you think, but he's very pushy in getting his students to achieve success. So anyway, his point here is, and that's what we want to talk about today, interest rates in many places in the world are at a historic low, and that also goes for property. And his point is that if you can't make your business work at these low interest rates, then you will never be able to make it work. So what do we think about that, Graham?
So what's he saying? He's saying basically, if you can't make a property business profitable when you can get next to near free money from a bank, then you certainly can't make it profitable when the interest rates change. And interest rates will go up in the next 5 years, right? And you have to account for that, right? So I guess that's what he's saying, right? That there must be a lot of people out there who are trying to make this profit and rely on the fact that they can only make profit when they're at 1 or 2% interest rates, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's sort of like I don't think he does property. He does a lot of M&A kind of things whereby he takes these loans from banks and financing for mergers and acquisitions. But I mean, the principles are the same for property, right? So money from banks is relatively cheap if you look at interest rates. And he's saying, look, if you ever can make a business work, it's now because the money is so cheap. So I think it's quite a one-sided view of how the world works, but definitely, low interest rates will help. But if I look at how I run my business, the business needs to accommodate higher interest rates. So if I look at my property portfolio, for instance, now I don't have that cheap of a financing in place at the moment in the UK, and it still works. So even though I pay more than a couple of percent of interest, the business still works. So it's good to get started with low interest rate, but it's also dangerous. And I think historically, if you look at the not so sophisticated property investors, they step into a market thinking that the properties they're buying are cheap because the interest is so low, right? And I even hear that from my friends saying, we should buy property now because the interest is so low. Yeah. Well, historically, that's a 7 or 8 year cycle, and the interest rates will go up again. And if you just count on the rent or the interest rates being this low only to make your business work, I think it's dangerous.
Yeah, you could be in a situation where you have only a little bit of cash flow in your property portfolio because you're at 1 or 2% interest rates, right? And then you have to ask, what happens when that goes to 7 or 8%, and now you're losing hundreds of dollars on each property? That's really difficult because now you have liabilities, and you may have a number of them, right? You maybe have 4 or 5 properties, each losing $500 a month. And that's the difference between an amateur and a professional investor, right? An amateur would only look at making their property interest, their portfolio work when conditions are favorable. A professional would say, okay, right, I'm making $500 a month positive cash flow on this now, but will that also be positive when I'm at 7 or 8%? They build in that contingency.
Yeah, actually, for me, it's interesting. I'm in a situation where I started my property journey in the UK 3-4 years ago. When I started the business there, I did not have access to cheap financing. So I had to use something called bridging, which is very expensive money. And the reason why I did that is that even with the bridging, which I think was at 10 or 11 or 12%, we would still be able to scrape a little bit of profit out of the business. And I knew that just building the portfolio with that expensive money would not give me money in the short term, but I knew that over time my conditions would improve. And by knowing that that would happen over time, that money would get cheaper, that I would be able to increase the rents, that I would be able to, optimize my cash flow, I started that business. So I started it when the rates were very high, knowing that over time and over, getting some more experience, it would improve. So these interest rates are something you always need to take into account, I think, in your property business or in any business you're in. And you should always account for those to go up to the normal levels, right? We're now at historically low levels of interest. You should always account for the fact that they go up to back to normal levels and still make your business work. Hope this was valuable for you. We'll see you in the next episode.